logged in properly.
Done.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to our CHAOSS SCMS program working group. I just shared the minutes with everyone. So please go ahead and add yourself as an attendee. And then this is the first meeting that we have dedicated to advancing this from a metric to a program initiative, for whatever we want to call it. And one of the things we talked about on Tuesday is that we actually need to find a new name, or that we decide we want to find a new name. And the background for that is SCMS comes from the socially constructed online. Dylan and Vinya came up with this term and they use it in their marketing and everything. So just to avoid any naming conflicts or possible future trademark concerns, we decided to give it a different name in the CHAOSS project. So I don't know how to go about naming things. That's always naming things.
That's like the hardest thing, right? Yeah.
Always difficult. I'm just gonna propose the social listening method. Or something along those lines. So if I were to summarize what this does, is we have a process for analyzing the conversations in a community. And we do this through extracting the messages, tagging them based on an agreed set of tags. And Elizabeth and Ria can talk about this because they have this so-called codex developed for the CHAOSS community for things that are interesting to observe. So people talking about, yeah, Ria and Elizabeth, you can better talk about this. How the SCMS
Hello,
works
everyone.
in practice.
Yeah. The social currency metric system is basically we collect all the data from different channels of the community. So for instance, we collected data from Twitter, IRC, GitHub, and similar sources. So after we have all the data, then we make a codex. So codex is basically a definition of all the tags that we want to use. So for instance, a community's definition of transparency would be different to community B's definition of transparency. So we just list down all the definitions of the terms and their use cases. So once we have them, we just have a concrete definition set of what we have to use in these scenarios. So after the codex is built, we start to tag the data, and we tag it on the basis of the 5 social currencies. And other than that, we also have weights. So we have different weighing schemes, and we tag the data according to different weighing schemes. So just to go into a little bit of depth, so we have one weighing scheme which says about how much a comment is beneficial or how much a comment matters to a specific community. That is given a higher score, and if a comment is not of much value to the community, we can just score it a little less. So when this entire tagging process is done, we download the Excel sheet, and after downloading the Excel sheet, we transfer it to make a dashboard, and from there we interpret different social currencies of the community.
And the only other thing, that's perfect. Like that's it in a nutshell. Thank you, Ria. The only other thing I would add is when we say social currency, there are things like trust and utility and things like that. So I think the idea is like to measure how much we are making an impact in the community and what they think about us and how they feel. Like, do they trust us? Are we useful? Are we, consistent? Things like that. So I don't know. I mean, I think I really like the social listening, and I see some other options. Sorry, the sun is like right in my face. I see some other options there that are being added. I really like those as well. So I was just looking for the spreadsheet. It's all in a spreadsheet right now in a Google Sheet. So I was just going to drop it in there so y'all could see it. It does take a few minutes to load because there's quite a lot of data in there, but I will drop it in the chat here just so you can see what we're talking about if you have never seen this before. And you can see on the second tab in the spreadsheet, that's our codex, quote unquote. So that's where we have defined through a series of meetings and conversations, we have defined what these things mean to us, to the CHAOSS project. And so for other projects, they would have to kind of go through that process and define it for them and decide how important certain things are to them, or add more if there were other things that they wanted to measure that were important to them. Transparency is obviously very huge for us. And I would think that in most open source projects, it's also a very good thing to keep track of and to make sure that you're hitting that mark. So I think that the terms that we have defined as far as, or I should say as Venya and Dylan had defined as transparent, utility, consistency, merit, and trust, those 5 things, I think those could carry on, those concepts could carry on to other open source projects. How they define them could be up to them as well.
So these social currency metrics and social listening, are these metrics, are you defining them based off of how they're collected? And can they be applied to the existing working groups and existing types of metrics that are already in existence in CHAOSS? Do they have to be pigeonholed as a separate working group? I mean, that's my question.
So the metrics involved here, I don't think we have them anywhere else. So when Sean did really great review of the metric as we have it released right now and identified several atomic metrics that we can pull out of this program, the social listening program, so that we can define the specific metrics around trust, around transparency, around those items. And then the program, the social listening program, is about describing how you go about collecting the data, how you go about analyzing the data, how do you define these different metrics in the codex. That's how I see it right now.
Yeah, and since I did that detailed review, I think there were 11 atomic metrics that I identified, and from the way that the CHAOSS project's worked to date, I don't think we can build an SCMS until we define what we mean by those 11 metrics.
And then Ria, as a newcomer, maybe I'm looking at the spreadsheet, and there's the code type, there was the currency, the category, and the weight. Can you just say a little bit more about that and about how some of the different code types are applied to communities versus people? I mean, do some of these categories, are you looking at the trust of a community versus the trust of an individual actor?
Yeah. So when here when we're talking about the social currency, so I'll start with, we have 5 social currencies listed. As Elizabeth talked about all of the 5, we have trust, transparency, consistency, merit, and one more. I'm forgetting the name. Utility. Yeah.
Utility,
So
yeah.
all those. So these 5 social currencies are based on the community. So we do not necessarily say how trustworthy a person is. Rather, we try to say how much trust a person has in a community. So these all metrics are defined for a community. So we're actually referring, when we see the social currency of the community. So essentially, we're marking all the social currencies and tags and categories related to the discussion on the community. So in case there is any discussion about interpersonal communication between two people, so that won't be part of that won't be necessarily important for the community. So that could be tagged as interpersonal in the category section. So when we have a if I understood your question correctly, so I just want to say that social currency is a term for the community, and we don't necessarily refer an individual for it.
I'm gonna keep quiet for a little bit because I'm an intruder a little bit. I'll let you guys talk a little bit more. Sorry.
So I have a few comments on this. So one, I think that Sean's point of the 11 metrics or so, we need to define those first and foremost. I think we can't really think about SCMS or whatever, social listening, as a program if we don't have the underlying components articulated. And as Elizabeth pointed out, I agree. I think that work can occur in the value working group to define those metrics. I think that's why you put that in there. So I think that needs to be done. The second thing that that it's more of a wonder. So we have 2 other programs or initiatives in the CHAOSS project at the moment. One is the D&I badging program, and the other is the community health reports program. And in both of those situations, we are taking defined metrics, again, to Sean's point, and bringing them out in front of people in active ways. So we're showing how the D&I metrics can be useful when you're thinking about events. And we're showing how, with the community reports, the metrics that have been developed other places. So can be brought to bear to give you some insight on your communities. In both of these programs, we as the CHAOSS project, have kind of committed time and resources to shepherd these along. So for example, when somebody requests a badge, we have a workflow that we've been working on for a long time. We have moderators with Asta and Matt. We have reviewers who have signed up, kind of external. But we have this whole process by which a badge can be done. And we support that as the project. And same holds true for the community reports. You can probably see where I'm going here. That we have a process that's set up by which people can request reports. And we have worked with the Linux Foundation to set this up via Salesforce. Somebody submits it, we collect the data ends up in people's hands, the request data ends up in people's hands, and then we have people on the back end with Georg and with Sean, at the Cauldron and Augur, you know what I'm saying? How does this program address that second part? How do we as a project legitimately support the deployment of this program? So if I look at the spreadsheet, like the CHAOSS spreadsheet, that was a lot of work, I'm guessing. So just based on the 4,500 messages that are in there. So I don't know that we can support that level of work. So if somebody said, I'd really love to understand the social listening that's going on in my community, we can't say no sweat.
Yeah.
Well, we're happy to do that.
There's some foundational work, right?
So what, so like what in the CHAOSS project do we support with respect to this program? And then we say, the rest is up to you. We can help you set up a spreadsheet, or we can, I don't know what people's thoughts are on that. Yes, Lawrence.
Sorry, just so now 2 years ago, I was looking a lot into playing in the cryptocurrency world, and looking at social listening, and basically I evaluate a lot of different systems in terms of people trying to look at social listening and try to make money out of it, and try to use algorithms to do that. And first of all, it's bogus. Don't do it. But the point, it's doable in terms of you could create systems to do social listening of discrete amounts of data for discrete things. And this model could be implemented successfully to track a certain number of limited things. If it was only this amount of details, maybe a little bit more limited in scope, so it could be more automated, it's doable. Just saying that it is possible if we really thought it could provide value, and we were willing to spend time and effort. It is doable. I'm not saying it's worth it, but it is a plausible thing.
So could you talk a little bit more about that, Lauren? So like when you're looking at, I assume you're looking at the Codex tab when you're saying it's doable?
So I'm actually looking at the other tab.
The data tab?
The data tab, and seeing how it's being, each of the different messages is being rated and tagged. So maybe, obviously, I don't think you could do the whole entire codex, but you could do some of that codex, a much more limited amount, and it's basically how much can you do that's automated, and how much validity will you trust in it. Basically, if you have someone test 3% of the, or 1% of the what the computer's coding is, what's the false positives? It's basically, if the computer is saying it's a transparent message, do you believe it?
So just to clarify, all of those tags were added by us, by a human being. So I don't know that there's any, I mean, I guess you could automate it at some point down the road, but that does take some time for
a lot of time.
The project will have to do that. Yeah.
A lot of time, and it would become dumber. But that's what machine learning is all about. That's what everyone was always yapping about machine learning and artificial intelligence. I mean, I was just throwing it out there as it's not unthinkable, and from that experience, in terms of positive versus negative versus looking for discussions of outliers, there's things that you could actually track.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I definitely don't think we're there yet, like at all with our system. So yeah, but yeah, I agree that that's something that absolutely we can.
But that means but if we're not there yet, then that proves Matt's point. That sort of proves Matt's point of what do we do with this. And so, Ria, I don't know you. I'm soon. What do you want? What's your goal with this project?
So my goal with this project is both to automate the tagging part and also to make it usable for other communities.
Okay. And so, from my perspective, I see this as being very usable in terms of if other communities have grant funding to do research on their community. So grant funding from a university project. So there's a university studying a community. They could use your methodology very specifically. If there's a grant coming from a foundation to support some activities, they're going to want to do evaluations. They're going to want more detailed evaluation of what's happening in a community. There's going to be opportunities to be able to do things that are more detailed than just every day. Hey, let's see what's happening. There's and Matt and George and everyone else who basically, I don't read as many PhD papers, but I've seen there's lots of there are lots of ways this could be used that I see value in, that I would read this and see this methodology and have trust in it. I would.
I'm curious if Elizabeth or Sean or Georg have kind of thoughts on, it's that question of if a community member says, yes, I would love to know more about social listening in my community, like how do we even?
So from my perspective, I think one of the things CHAOSS has accomplished for open source in general is we've given common definitions to things that people previously created their own definitions for, and were therefore unable to draw comparisons across different tools or implementations of metrics that had the same names. In order to make the SCMS consistently usable by open source projects, we need to do the work of defining those consistent 11 atomic metrics that emerged from the larger mega proposal, so that whomever builds this tool has a common definition of those 11 core metrics that we kind of pulled out. I think on top of that, then when you get to the machine learning part, that's where there's, I think, a need for some shared training data, so that there's a starting place that everyone can go to say, okay, I've defined and calculated these 11 metrics, and I have a training set that I can run, even though it's not exactly what I'm looking for. I can run a training set, a standard training set over my data with these 11 metrics using machine learning and have a result. And then do what all people who do machine learning do, which is check the result, validate the result, make sure it's what they want.
And so if our goal is to, in fact, automate most of this to enable other communities to more easily use it instead of having to do it manually, do we have the staffing to write that code? Like, who's going to write that? That seems like a lot of work.
Well, I sense that I don't think that there's going to be so the steps leading to the machine learning piece and the core of what we're measuring can be defined. But when it comes to how each community uses it, I do think that that's going to be context dependent, and how they do the machine learning and what parameters they focus on, emphasize, or weight differently. All of those will become contextual choices in a way that's kind of similar to how different projects choose to emphasize pull requests, comments, or new contributors at different points in their life cycle. So I don't think the SCMS is going to be one thing. I think it's a context dependent thing. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm just trying, I'm kind of like Matt, I'm trying to decide what our deliverable is. Like, how far do we go? Is it just training people on how to do it and then leaving it up to them to do it? Is it, actually providing them the software that scoops up all the data and plops it in a spreadsheet? Is it a combination of those two things? Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think it can be the 11 metrics and one worked example, which the worked example would include, it could include instructions. It doesn't even have to include actual software. It could say we use these Python libraries, and this is an example of a way that we use this training data to produce a result. So it can be very high level and not intended to be a delivered piece of software. But we have to go as far as, if it's like defining the 11 metrics without explaining how the rest of it works and providing an example training set. We are, as I think you're suggesting, potentially leaving everyone in the dark. Like,
Yeah.
there's sort of that then a miracle occurs cloud.
So that is one of the things where I see the difference between the other two programs we have right now and where we are with this. At least in my head, I haven't solved it in my head, so I don't know how we actively support people to actually start using the SCMS beyond documenting the process, documenting the metrics, documenting the codex, and maybe recording some instructions. And yeah, I haven't figured out how we as a community, what we would provide in this context to actively deploy or help people use this. I
So
like
then,
the
go ahead. Well,
no, I
so
like
then
the idea
go
of
ahead.
the AI. Go ahead.
But then we're back to, okay, so you're all gonna maybe kill me because I was the one that suggested we move this to a program. And I mean, if it comes down to, and I have agreed with everything that has been said here, that if it is about working out the 11 metrics, that I do think that has to happen if we're gonna even talk about social listening at all. And then to Sean's point, say like one worked example. Here's what you could do, and if that's the end of the line, like here's the metrics, here's one worked example, and here's the method by which we did it. If that's a full stop, then to me this isn't a program. Then it's just, here's some information available from the CHAOSS project about how to bring these 11 metrics together in a way that might be meaningful for you. We don't help you do this beyond the documentation that we provide to you. Because the other two are they're intended, as they're rolling out, intended to be, as you know, very active engagements by the CHAOSS project to help people build those community reports and to help them get D&I badges.
Yep.
I mean, we could offer to help them understand it in a more, hand-holdy kind of way. So if we did want it to be something that we use to engage with the community, I think we could do that. I don't know how sustainable that is, only because it would depend on a few individuals to be the ones that help people implement this. So I'm not sure about that part, what we want to do with that, but I think there is potential if we wanted it to do. And maybe that's down the line. Maybe we would have to get funding for a person to do that or something like that.
And right now, that's where Samantha and Dylan sell that as a consultancy. Because if you remember setting it up for CHAOSS, how many hours it took to get this codex defined and revising it. That's a lot of work.
And this one seems, again, I'm just, the D&I badging program and the community reports, I can, at least personally, can see the trajectory of them a little bit more clearly to me, like what my hoped goals are on them. I don't know that those have been articulated quite as well, at least not yet in this situation, with respect to the CHAOSS project.
Yep, I agree. I'm on the at the same on the same page there.
And I also agree, like asking Sean to just like add the machine learning component to Augur. Sean, just do that, would you?
we have 4 machine learning workers now after the Google Summer of Code, but they're not focused on SCMS. And I think really one important thing to understand in plain English is that this is a pretty standard implementation of a machine learning algorithm, and the critical piece is the training data. And the training data lets somebody see something work, even though it's that training data might not be relevant to them or what they're mostly interested in. From there, they can create their own training data. But so machine learning, there's supervised and unsupervised machine learning. This relies on a supervised machine learning approach, which means the training data is required for any algorithm. And so the shared training data does have value, even if the end result is go build your own thing. That worked example is the training data is like the minimum requirement for people to even have an idea how to do that, in addition to the 11 discrete metrics. And maybe the 11 discrete metrics is a sufficient place to stop, because I think they have utility.
Is the work that Ria and Elizabeth have done for the CHAOSS community, is that already enough to serve as a training data set?
I think so. I mean, like I said, it's never going to apply to all projects, and it's never going to give a useful result to all projects, but it helps any project see the mechanics of how they would do that. And then you have to explain to them, okay, you're going to have somebody go through and code 300 of these posts or conversations in order to have a result that's useful to you. I mean, there's just,
And I know,
that work is
go ahead.
always there.
I was just going to say, I know that that's going to be a huge barrier to people implementing this. Like, just to be honest, I mean, you know, we're already kind of, I won't say struggling, but, you know, we haven't had an influx of community health report requests, and that's just filling out a form. So like, I think to get someone to actually take the time to tag these, they have to really, really want it. So I don't know how to fix that. I don't think you can. I think that that's just the nature of this whole thing, is that it does require the upfront time. But, you know, in an open source world where people are already strapped for time, and, you know, I don't know. I don't know how to address that, or how to make it easier for people to do that, to reduce that barrier to entry. Because I think that's going to be another big thing where, you know, again, with like the D&I badging, it's work, but not that much work. So the barrier isn't super high. It's just high enough. It's like a really good spot. So I think that might be another thing that we would want to address, is how to bring that into a reasonable realm of effort for people who are trying to implement this. And like Lauren said, if you have a grant for it, then you're kind of good. Like, then you have, you know, the funds and the time and everything, all the resources you need to implement this. But what about everybody else who doesn't have a grant, who is just, you know, a regular project that wants to know?
So do we have a sense, this is also on the, with respect to the other programs, like the demand for understanding D&I more clearly in your open source project, the demand for that is high. There are a lot of projects and organizations that really are pushing to have better transparency on this. With respect to community health, I would even just say understanding, even at the highest level, some basic understanding, even like on GitHub Insights, just some basic understanding of the health and activity in your project. I would say that demand is also high right now, just kind of listening to the pulse of the open source world. Does anybody have a sense on what the demand is for in terms of the social listening within a project? Because that has I think that matters too.
I have had probably 5 conversations over the last year where people said yes, interested, but we don't have the time to actually start doing this. So I've been shopping around this idea when I saw an opening, when I talked with people, and yeah, there were a few. So it's a very small number who actually care about this, and I've not found anyone who was willing to put in the time and effort to make this happen.
That would kind of raise to that other, it's kind of related, I guess. There's the concern that if we do this effort to make a service available and the demand is not there.
The other possibility is we just build the 11 metrics, the 11 defined metrics, and that I think they are instruments that people can use their own methods to discern value from.
So would those, oh, go ahead.
How many projects is this relevant to? Some of this goes to what the community health reports. The community health reports is relevant to some projects, but if you're really measuring activity, how relevant is it to a lot of projects? So if you're looking at the social activity, the social currency, how relevant is it if there's only 4 or 5 people communicating in a project in any 1 month or 2? It's not that relevant to a large audience. The badging is very relevant to a much larger audience. So that's why I think it's a more successful idea. The audience penetrate is much larger.
I was going to ask you, Sean, if you think those 11 metrics that we want to define, we're going to put them in the value working group, right? We said that.
I mean,
do you think
that's where they emerged from.
Yeah. Do you think they should just be like a focus area within the value group called social listening or something like that? Or
it's a good idea.
Yeah, that would be that is actually a good idea. I'd have to go back and look at what the metrics were. I don't know that I've retained a list of them, but I think that would work, and that would let people create something of value. And like in a lot of cases, people take the metrics that we define and then they munge them together in different ways for their own purposes. And I think this collection of metrics lends itself to that.
I like that idea.
because they, like you just said, Sean, they might, those metrics might even work well with others that we have defined that we haven't really made the connection with before. But we might, if we have them in a broader context, then maybe there's some creative ways that we can use those metrics in addition or in conjunction with others too. So.
We're at the end. I'm going to stop
Hi,
recording.
Vinya.
So
hi,
sorry. I had it on the calendar as 9 a.m. my time, and that was incorrect.